morning, everyone. We're going to wait for everyone to join the Zoom, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Glad you're here and are able to join us this morning. All right, good morning, everyone. I believe that we have everyone is in the meeting now, so welcome. And let me start off by saying I apologize if you hear some thumps and drilling in the background today. We've got some more construction going on in our building. As you all, I'm sure, are aware, we are well on our way to our grand reopening in May. So we've got just a couple more weeks of construction going on, and then our wonderful team of curators will get started installing all of our new exhibitions, including our Commonwealth, which you will get a sneak peek of today. So I will try and speak very loudly when my mic is turned on, but hopefully Andy's side of the building will be quieter. So again, welcome to this February 2020 edition of Curator Conversations. My name is Elizabeth Darling, and I am the manager of membership and annual giving here at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. And again, we are so glad to see you virtually this month. And joining us today will be two of our curatorial team, Andrew Talkov, who is the Senior Director of Curatorial Affairs, and Catherine Stergar, who is our Curatorial Assistant. And they will be speaking about, again, one of our newest exhibitions, our Commonwealth. And before I turn it over to them this morning, I do just want to take care of some housekeeping. If you have any tech issues during the Zoom, feel free to add those to the chat. And we will have time for questions at the end of the program. So if you think of those throughout the program, you can add them to the chat. You can also use the Q&A feature that is part of Zoom. Thank you again for joining today. And without further ado, I'll hand it off to Andy.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I will say that it is a little quieter on my side of the building today. The jackhammering hasn't started outside as they put a water feature around the warhorse statue. I'll also say that today is the first day of installation of one of our largest exhibits that are being developed that we'll talk about today. As part of our History Matters campaign, which is our Commonwealth. So I was just reminded that today is the first day that the crew that's working on that has started working. So that's super exciting. It's months of work starting to be turned into physical form. So it's really exciting. And so just a little bit about what your curatorial department has been doing over the course of the last, I'd say, 18 months or so in developing exhibitions. There are, we've counted about 20 different displays and exhibits that are being installed as part of our grand reimagining. And on this floor plan, there are just a few that I'll highlight. Among some of the ones that that we've been working on is, of course, the large space at the main entrance. Here it's marked Great Hall, which will be known as Commonwealth Hall. Will feature some vehicles from our collections. one of which you'll hear about a little bit later. And then an exhibition, there's an introductory film in a new purpose-built theater. History Matters is an exhibition that explores why history should matter to all of us. Virginia Treasures is an exhibition that features some objects that are associated with people in Virginia's past who have had a significant influence on both our Commonwealth and our national history. There are some smaller exhibitions that we've installed. Uncommon Strength is a project that we did with the Virginia Department of Historic Resources about the interpretation of sites of enslavement. Taking Aim is an exhibition about firearms in Virginia's story. Finding the Familiar in this blue box over here is an exhibition about how we look at everyday objects and the multiple ways that we can interpret them. The Family Gallery is a remarkable hands-on space for some of our youngest guests, which is a totally new feature for the museum and a totally new approach to the way that we are engaging audiences. And then the largest piece of this puzzle is our Commonwealth in orange at the lower right. And so in order to do all of this work in the amount of time that we had, we knew that we were going to have to bring on some extra help. So as I said, there's a team of exhibit fabricators who are working to turn a lot of what has until now been on paper into reality. There's an exhibit design and content development group that has been helping us with History Matters, Virginia Treasures, the Family Gallery, and our Commonwealth. And then one of the things that we knew would be critical would be to have a person on our staff who could help to coordinate all of this effort, managing both, research and story development and object identification. And so 11 months ago, we brought on Catherine Stergar as a curatorial assistant for this project. A lot of her work has been focused on our Commonwealth. And so I'm really pleased to be able to introduce all of you to someone. I mean, many of you have seen me on these programs before, but I'm really thrilled to be able to show you someone who's working so hard behind the scenes to bring you all these wonderful projects that will come to fruition in May. So Catherine, welcome to Curator Conversations. And maybe you could talk a little bit about what your role has been over the last 11 months here at the VMHC.
Thanks, Andy. Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine. As Andy mentioned, I've been the curatorial assistant here since last March. It's been a really wonderful experience working on all of these exciting projects. So just kind of a bit of an overview of my work. As Andy said, I've been helping with coordinating a lot of the research and work and tasks needed to stay on the timeline to get everything ready to open later this spring. So that has been, attending meetings with everyone working on these projects at PRD, also with partner institutions we're working with, reaching out to various lenders about possible objects that we could display in the exhibits, and also managing checklists, needing to know all of the information for all the objects, making sure things will fit in their casework. So there are just a lot of, tasks and things to keep track of as we're doing a lot of these projects. I've been assisting with all of that. And my background is in museums and doing historical research. And so that's definitely been one of my favorite aspects, is just learning about the collections here at VMHC and researching artifacts and finding stories that we can feature in these exhibits. So it's really been a pleasure to work with you all and all of our various partners on the exhibit.
So Catherine, how did you get interested in history in the first place? I think it's always nice to hear people's, origin stories about how they end up working in museums. So why don't you tell us yours?
Yeah, so actually it relates to two images that you see on the screen. So I really trace my love and interest in history and learning about communities and history of different places and people, really to my childhood. My maternal grandparents loved Americana and collected antiques, and they also had various objects that were passed down in their families that they treasured and came to my mom, and now I have some of them. So I grew up with an understanding that objects can be tied to family history and memories and carry a lot of significance for people. And the image that you see of the woman with children on the bed is my maternal grandmother. I'm holding my uncle and my mother, and they're sitting on a rope bed that was actually made by my great-great-grandfather in North Carolina. And that rope bed passed down in the generations. I own it now. I grew up sleeping in it. So that was just an object that was very special to me growing up, special to my mom, and special to our family. And so that's just a fun photo that she had found relatively recently that actually shows them on the bed. And then, of course, we had lots of family photographs and other objects that I just loved learning about when I was little. And then my great-grandmother was a self-taught artist on my paternal grandfather's side. And that's one of my favorite paintings by her. And so I just loved artwork. I wanted to be like her and study visual arts when I was growing up, and just loved learning about all of her artwork that was in our house while I was growing up, in my grandparents' house and other family members' houses. And she just did it for, the love and joy of it. And she would do it on found objects like cardboard. And so they're like treasured possessions of our family. So I really tie my interest in like history and arts childhood. And then I ended up going to college at Davidson and studied religion and gender and women's studies there, and then was doing some other things, and then decided to pursue a career in studying decorative arts and material culture studies. And I was able to go to Bard Graduate Center in New York City. Graduated with a master's degree in decorative arts history, design history, and material culture studies. And one of my professors there was really wonderful, and she was a cultural historian, and she described material culture studies as looking at the relationship between people and objects, and understanding objects can be historical evidence. And that really resonated with me, as I mentioned, growing up and knowing that a lot of objects in my childhood were tied to family history and memory. And so I just love doing material culture studies for that, and what we can find out about people and communities through objects that are left behind or passed down generation by generation. And so that's one aspect that's been really exciting for me to work at the VMHC, because these are a lot of the type of artifacts that we collect here, and how they can, illuminate various community and regional histories, very specific histories tied to individuals over time. And while I was at grad school, I became really interested in studying specific materials like pottery and silver and textiles. So the beautiful jar you see on the screen was created by Mary Chase Carey, and she was an art potter in Detroit. And I actually wrote about her for my master's thesis. So I'm particularly interested in late 19th, early 20th century art and design. And then had wonderful opportunity to work at museums and curatorial internships while in school, and that really helped guide me to museum work. So I was able to do an internship at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum and assisted with research for a 2016 exhibition there called By the People, Designing a Better America. I was looking at contemporary design and how it can challenge inequalities in society. And then I was able to work at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and did a post-grad position there where I was able to do a lot of different research on various objects and work with the decorative arts curators there. And one of the main projects I worked on is for an exhibition that'll open in a few years. And a catalog was just published that I was able to contribute to about Edward C. Moore, who is the head of silver design at Tiffany and Company. So that was a really exciting project. So I got to work on that, a lot of different exhibition development there. And then moved to Richmond and worked at the Maymont House Museum in collections management, did work in museum education there, and also as a curatorial assistant. So got to do a lot of different museum work there, and then started at VMHC last spring.
Well, congratulations on being published.
Thanks.
Since that book came out while you've been here, but I know relates to work that you did back at the Met, so that's really exciting. So a lot of the work that you've been doing actually in ceramics and material culture has been remarkably helpful in finding objects for the exhibit we're going to talk about today, which is our Commonwealth. So some of the people that are with us today may have seen some of these renderings as part of other member programs, like our State of the Museum programs. But here are a few artist renderings of what our Commonwealth will look like. Again, these are very early artist renderings, but on the left, you can see the entrance to the exhibition. Our Commonwealth is a 5,000 square foot exhibit that focuses on each of the 5 cultural regions in Virginia. Now, of course, we can divide Virginia in any number of ways. We can divide it geographically, we can divide it into much finer cultural regions, but for the purpose of this exhibition and given the space that we have, we settled on 5. So Tidewater, Northern Virginia, the Shenandoah Valley, Southwest Virginia, and Central Virginia. And so in each one of the galleries here on the right-hand side, you can see a rendering of what the Tidewater Gallery, will look like in part. And the lower right is a rendering of the Shenandoah Valley piece. And I think you can get a sense that it's very rich in textures. So you can see the brick and the clapboarding that is, maybe you would find in Eastern Virginia, or the stone walls that are, exist throughout the valley. So there are textural elements like that. There are interactives that are digital that allow you to explore deeper themes that are in each of the regions. There will be a soundscape in each region that evokes the sounds and music of those areas of Virginia. Each space has an 18-foot wide, what's being termed as a living mural, which will be a changing series of images that really do help you to put you into the space in the region. But at its very core, what our Commonwealth is, it's about the stories of people in the places they lived over time. And it's stories and the people that are really driving this exhibition. It's not comprehensive. So every story that's possible in a region couldn't be included, but one of the ways that we designed the exhibition is to allow stories to be easily changed, which we plan to do in the years ahead, so that we can both respond to events as they're happening in the various regions of Virginia, as well as explore other stories related to the themes that are presented in each region. And Catherine and I will talk about some of those themes as we move on. So not to belabor this, architect's rendering of what the gallery space will look like, but as you come in at the top into an introductory space, which will ask the two primary questions that this exhibit hopes to get you all thinking about, which is, what does it mean? What does Virginia mean to you? And what does it mean to be from a place, right? So even if you're not a Virginian, the stories and themes that are represented here are tied to the places in Virginia, but are also very common themes in everywhere where people live. And so I think it's a nice opportunity to think not only about what Virginia is and what makes each of our regions unique, but what makes the place that you live unique if you live in, Reno, Nevada, for instance. So, so people will hopefully be able to take those messages away with them. So each region has a space. So clockwise from the top, it's Tidewater, Central Virginia, Southwest Virginia, Shenandoah Valley, Northern Virginia. One of the things that I'm interested in asking Catherine, because she's worked on other projects at other museums, is how is this project different from the ones that you've worked on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say one of the biggest ways that this exhibition has been different is that it has people in place over time. So we're, have, very early history all the way to present day. So I think just the span of time is new for me, rather than focusing on a very specific time period and also a specific topic. We are looking at so many different themes and topics by region. So, it's been exciting for me because I'm not from Virginia originally. I'm from South Carolina and have lived in some other states. So through this, though, because we have like this sampler thematic approach and multiple topics, I've learned so much about Virginia history over time. And then another aspect of it that's really wonderful is that VMHC has been working with 10 partner institutions, so 2 for each region. And so I've gotten to know the staff that we're working closely with at these institutions, learning about the artifacts that they're loaning, and been working with them in various meetings over the last 11 months, really developing the content region by region. So that has been new for me to work with such a large team on the exhibit, but it's really been a great experience.
I'll also mention that you spent a fair amount of your time on the phone and meeting individual people too from all over the Commonwealth, as we try to hunt down, stories from various communities. The partners have been wonderful in that they bring their own expertise, as well as their collections and to the project. And I will say that the partnership isn't just one way. So when we made these arrangements with each one of the museums that you can see on the screen, we're also providing reciprocal services to them too. So we have been loaning traveling exhibitions to our partner organizations and are prioritizing requests for loans from some of these organizations from our own collection. So it's really a great opportunity for these organizations to work together, around the Commonwealth, which is also really helpful to us too, because our collection is certainly statewide, and it is much more representative statewide when we talk about books and manuscripts in the collection, our object collection tends to be a little more focused on Central Virginia because we happen to be located in Central Virginia. So it's been really nice, to work with all of these folks. And I know that Catherine has some favorite stories to tell about the work with each partner. So we'll go through some of that, I think.
Yeah. And so before we jump into some Linder objects and stories,
Sorry, I stole your thunder a little bit.
No, you're fine. One of the aspects that we talked about earlier was part of my job has been also to look at a lot of artifacts here in VMHC's collection. And so we have millions of items in the collection across the museum object collection and then manuscript and library collection. So I just thought it would be fun to show some photos of the various types of artifacts that I've gotten to look at over the last year. It's just a sample of them, as tried to find objects that could speak different themes and moments in time, or histories tied to certain people or communities. So some of these you might end up seeing when you visit the exhibitions later this spring. And so, so I thought that I could share in conversation with Andy too, hope he chimes in as well, about various kind of stories and ideas that we've heard from lenders, and also some of the loans that we'll be borrowing for display in the exhibit. So these two items are in the collection of the Mariners Museum and Park. And it's been really exciting to work with the folks over there and learn about, shipbuilding and boat building and, the various working on the water in the region, and history of different professions tied to the water in the region. But one of the topics that we will be focusing on in the Tidewater Gallery is looking at traditions that have been passed down in various communities in the region. And we had reached out to Jean Villas-Egner, who's the curator of maritime history and culture at the Mariners Museum, to ask if they had examples of sailors' art in their collection. And she came back with a wonderful idea to feature information about August Bernard Cap Coleman, who is a very famous, he's known the world over as a famous tattoo artist. And he set up a shop in Norfolk in the early 20th century. And a lot of tattoo artists today look back at his work and are influenced by him today. And the Mariners Museum actually in the 1930s worked with Coleman and acquired objects from him. And they actually commissioned him to create this watercolor that you see to show some of his original tattoo designs. And so we'll be borrowing this for the exhibition, have on display. And then the photograph, you can see him standing in front of his shop. So that was we just really liked that idea, and think it might be unexpected for visitors to see looking at tattoo art as a tradition over time in the region, and to share information about Coleman.
Yeah, I think that this was such a great idea. I'm so glad that she brought these pieces to us, because I think when we were thinking about traditions, some of the things that came to the fore, of course, were the traditions that have continued among indigenous people in the Tidewater region, and some, regional dialects in the Tidewater region. But I will say that tattooing kind of came completely out of left field. Yeah. Like we hadn't been going there. So yeah, it's a great great piece and a great story. And of course, with tattoo culture being so prominent today, I think this is a nice connection between past and present that, like you said, I think might be a little surprising to our guests.
And then, story connected to our other Tidewater partner in the Eastern Shore, Virginia Historical Society. It was related again to another tradition, a craft tradition of decoy making and decoy carving, which is very prominent on the Eastern Shore. And so this was another new subject for me to learn about. And they are generously lending this decoy that was carved by Miles Hancock, who was from Chincoteague. And I actually found this postcard in our collection that you can see on the right, showing him carving a decoy with some already carved and painted ones on the ground to his right. So this is actually connected to traditions too, but also working on the water. Hancock taught other decoy carvers his craft, and it was passed down. So we'll be highlighting a story of someone who learned from him and continues to do the craft today. But the decoy carving just relates to duck hunting in the region, which is still practiced widely. And but a lot of these decoys now are, sought after by collectors. So they're not always used actually, out on the water like they were historically.
Yeah, I was really surprised that one of the things that has been great about the work that you've been doing is you've been uncovering a lot of things that I don't think we had, like a lot of the curators knew were in the collection. So it was really great that you were able to put these two pieces together, one from our collection and one from the Eastern Shore, Virginia Historical Society's collection. Such a great action shot,
Yeah.
The decoy.
Yeah, so a photograph of him wound up on a postcard. So yeah, glad we have that image of him. And then this was another of my favorite topics that I learned about over the course of this project. As I mentioned, I love studying pottery. I don't have a specialization in Indigenous pottery traditions, but I've really enjoyed learning about monkey pottery traditions in the Tidewater region, and how this has been a tradition that goes back thousands of years, and especially in the 20th century to the present day. Members of the Pamunkey Indian tribe have really sought to preserve a lot of the traditional methods of coil building and blackware, vessel creation. And so we wanted to highlight this as a story and a tradition in the region. And so we are working with the Department of Historic Resources, who are generously loaning this example by Mary A. Bradby, who is a member of the Pamunkey Indian tribe, and she was a prolific potter, created many different types of vessels that are in collections. And then I came across this quote from Deborah Martin, who's a contemporary artist and member of the tribe today. She said, "It is something that has been our history for thousands of years and is still an important part of our culture. I want to carry this forward by teaching the younger people the skills to keep creating Pamunkey pottery. As I get older, I am driven to make sure it gets carried forward into the future generations." So I think that quote just kind of captures how important it is to their culture and passing on this tradition, and also gives you a sense of the approach that Andy mentioned. We're trying to share as many first-person accounts throughout the exhibition through quotes and stories.
Yeah, it was good. Thanks for mentioning that, because that is one of the things that will be very noticeable when you visit the exhibit, is the fact that we've worked very hard to include the voices of the people who participated in events or the people whose objects that are on display, so that we get a real sense of people, right? So the exhibit is really very strong in the voices of others. And so yeah, and also I think it's worth mentioning that even though we've been talking about carrying on traditions in Tidewater, the idea of carrying on traditions, that just happened to be the place where that seemed to be a strong theme that came out in our discussions about Tidewater, Virginia. But we totally understand that traditions are carried on all over the Commonwealth, and those will be all represented. I mean, you'll get a good sense of that. So just because a theme was introduced in one section, it is very present in other sections as well.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so moving on to Northern Virginia. So working with the Manassas Museum System and Historic Alexandria. And so another topic that we're looking at is how important Washington, D.C. is to the Northern region, and how Northern Virginia's industries supported the capital. And one thing that we learned about was that the dairy industry was actually a very critical industry of Northern Virginia that supported the capital and Virginia overall. And so Manassas Museum System is generously lending this breeder's record book, which was how dairy farmers are able to kind of keep track of their cows and their breeding and selling them. And then we actually also have various dairy bottles in the collection here at VMHC that I got to look at. And the one on your right is from Manassas, from the Birmingham Dairy, that will be on display to speak to this story in Northern Virginia. And so for speaking of, history of Washington, D.C., something that I learned more about and didn't know that much about before working on this project was how part of Virginia used to be historically part of Washington, D.C., and the city of Alexandria was in that section of Virginia when D.C. was created. And so Historic Alexandria is generously loaning a stoneware storage jar where you can see in this detail photo that I put up, it's marked H.C. Smith, which was the owner of the pottery who sold the wares to customers. But underneath that, it's marked for Alexandria, D.C. So showing them that Alexandria was part of Washington, D.C. and no longer part of Virginia. So we'll have that on display. It'll also speak to how craftspersons and merchants really moved into Alexandria and areas in and around DC to support the capital through various industries. And then we'll also speak about the history of retrocession when this section of Virginia was given back to Virginia in the 1840s and how that is also linked to slavery and protecting that institution in Virginia in the South. And then one of the topics we'll be discussing about specifically for the pottery that you see is that the Wilk Street Pottery actually hired many free potters of color. They also had enslaved potters who worked for them. So we're trying to also share stories about that. And one of the potters there specifically who had been formerly enslaved and he purchased his freedom. His name was David Jarbor. So I'm excited it's been great to learn about that history of that pottery.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the location of the capital, in DC and its effect on Northern Virginia is a major part of the Northern Virginia story. But I think it's really interesting thinking about Alexandria and these industries that were supplying this growing capital. Now, I mean, we have, server farms and things that support, the work that happens in the capital. But so, that's a really interesting angle, I think, to look at, Northern Virginia's story as it relates to the history of the capital.
All right, now moving to Shenandoah Valley. So one of the partners there is Museum of the Shenandoah Valley, and they are lending us several artifacts for display, including this server or food safe that was used to probably store and serve food in someone's household. And I've learned a lot about craft traditions in that region from their museum. So the staff that we worked with on this exhibition, but also like catalogs and exhibitions that they've put on in the past that I've followed. So I personally love the pie safe or food safe form. It's been a furniture form that I've always really enjoyed learning about. So I'm really excited to feature this in the exhibition when it opens and learn about the maker, William F. Peatfish of Page County, because one of the unique features of this safe is that the maker, William Pete Fish, actually signed it. So you can see a detail of the interior inscription by him. It's very faint, but written in pencil, and he also dated it to 1875. So when you're studying decorative arts and crafts, it's always really exciting when you come across those pieces that are actually signed by the maker, and you can correctly attribute them to an area and person, and then also get that date too, which is great.
Yeah, this is a great piece. I'm really glad that we were able to borrow it. The decoration in the tin is really incredible here. Here's an object that I think a lot of our members will be familiar with if they've visited, in the past.
Yeah, so this coach is in the collection and was actually one of my very first research projects that I had when I started here last spring. And I have it on here. It won't be displayed in our Commonwealth, but it'll be back in on display in the Commonwealth Hall, the new renovated entrance to the museum in the spring. But I was trying to find out more about the owners and use of this carriage and where it was originally made, and it was used and owned by a family in Rockbridge County. So Eric Wilson, the executive director at Rockbridge Historical Society that we worked with as a partner for our Commonwealth, he was very generous and helped me with that research process. So I definitely wanted to include that here. I'm very grateful to his research suggestions and help through that process. I'm excited for visitors to see some of our new research and interpretation for the carriage later this spring when we reopen. And then you'll see some county fair materials on the right. In one of the meetings that we had with partners going through all the topics, it was a process of, going through and getting their insights and thoughts about ways that we could explore various topics. And one thing that we want to do, like traditions throughout the different regional galleries, is to look at ways that communities come together and gather for different reasons or different occasions. And one thing that both partners in Shenandoah Valley emphasized was looking at county fairs and how significant they are in the region. So that was a fun project for me to learn about county fairs in the area. And then this is an early premium list from 1872 for the Augusta County Fair that we have in the collection here at VMHC that will be on display in the exhibit. And then I was just trying to do some history about this fair and loved this newspaper article about the very first one saying that it was a triumphant success and it was the most entertaining fair which has ever been held in this state. So that was published in the Stanton Spectator in 1868. And then of course, we'll also be looking at the fairs over time. So we'll have some more contemporary pieces speaking about fairs today, but also other festivals like cultural festivals for different communities as well, which so that's been an exciting topic to work on.
One of the things I'll say is that because of Catherine's research on the coach, which can frequently happen as you dig deeper into the story of objects, is that our interpretation of the coach changed a little bit as a result of what Catherine was able to find out. So we thought the coach might have been from an earlier date, but Catherine was able to more specifically date it to closer to the Civil War period. So that's great to have more accurate information that we can present, and it's that revised interpretation will be, as Catherine said, in the Commonwealth Hall. So looking forward to seeing the carriage in that space. But thank you for doing that. You traveled literally all over the Commonwealth trying to find information about the carriage. So yeah. that was great.
Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed that project. It was fun to really kind of deeply dive into one specific object to research. And then I'm including this sign from an elementary school in Harrisonburg. We're working with the Harrisonburg City Public Schools to speak to the diversity in the student population. So that was something that Andy actually brought up in one of our content meetings as an idea to look at how this school system supports many of its students for whom English is not a first language. And many have immigrated here, are children of immigrants to the region. So we just all really loved this welcome sign from the elementary school, and we'll be reproducing it in the exhibition and how it shows multiple languages to reflect the diversity of the student population.
Yeah, I was very surprised to learn that Harrisonburg had one of the most diverse school districts in the Commonwealth. There are more than 50 languages spoken in their school system, which they have been very dedicated to serving all of those students, in the best way possible. This sign is written in Russian, Arabic, and Spanish, which are just three of those languages that are spoken in the public school system. I first learned about this when I was listening to a podcast, and they did a feature episode on the schools in Harrisonburg. So I'm so thrilled that we were able to work with the school system there and include an object, not only this sign, but some objects that are associated with working in the schools and trying to serve a really diverse population. So.
All right, now we're moving into the Southwest region. So as I mentioned before, I'm not originally from Virginia, so this project has been really exciting for me to learn a lot more about Virginia history and its regions. And I've really been fascinated by the history of craft traditions and just general history of the Southwest region. And we are working with the William King Museum of Art there, and their executive director, Betsy K. White, is a scholar on a lot of the decorative arts and crafts traditions in this region. So I have really enjoyed learning about textile and pottery history from her through this process. As I mentioned before, these are two materials that I really love learning about. And we're going to look at textile traditions as one focus topic for this first rotation in the exhibition in the spring. And she is generously lending through William King this lap robe or small blanket that was used to cover your lap while riding in a carriage. It was made at Clinch Valley Blanket Mill in Cedar Bluff. And the weavers there were the Goodwin family. They founded this mill, used water-powered looms, and created coverlets in the late 1800s, early 1900s that were referencing historical coverlets from the region. So I'm excited that we'll be able to display this textile and speak about that history. And then Betsy White has also done research on Rosemont Industries, and we've done research here. Dr. Karen Cherry has done research on Rosemont here at VMHC, founded by Laura Lou Copenhaver in the region. She actually worked with Clinch Valley Blanket Mill to produce coverlets and textiles that she sold through a catalog. This is a catalog from 1970 in our collection. For Rosemont. So people were able to order textiles or hooked rugs that were made in the region. And they were also looking back at historical styles of styles in the early 20th century. And then of course, Southwest, has an enormously important music history that I've enjoyed learning about. And we're working with Blue Ridge Institute and Museum, and they have incredible collections that relate to the history of music and instrument making in the region. And I've enjoyed learning specifically about the Hash family from the region. Albert Hash was a famous fiddle maker and player. He taught his daughter, Audrey Hasham, how to create fiddles herself. And so she became a renowned maker as well. And during her lifetime, we're excited to be able to borrow this fiddle from Blue Ridge Institute to have in the exhibition. And then I include another quote from her that I found when she speaks about creating the first fiddle to show her father after he's taught her that craft. She said, I got the fiddle done and I was so nervous when it was done. I knew it wouldn't play. I just knew it wouldn't. I handed it to Daddy and it played. I gave the fiddle to Daddy for his birthday and he said, I'd rather have that than a brand new Cadillac. So I just thought that was a very sweet quote that really conveys their relationship and passing on that tradition and knowledge.
Absolutely. Yeah, they were very, very generous with their musical instrument collection. And this is a great story. I love that quote. There are lots of moments like that, you know, in the exhibit, I think, where, again, sort of the words of the people that participated, as opposed to you or me writing about, you know, the, you know, Ham family, about, you know, them actually talking about their experience. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and now moving on to Central, our final region. So enjoyed working with the Fredericksburg Area Museum and Lynchburg Museum system in our content development process. And so one of the things that they really highlighted and shared a lot of information about was history of industries in the region. So we're gonna borrow and display this account book from the Catherine Furnace, which was an historic iron furnace in the 19th century in the Fredericksburg area from Fredericksburg Area Museum. And then we will also display a couple of shoes that were manufactured at Craddock Berry Shoe Company in Lynchburg, and these will be on loan from Lynchburg Museum System. So they have a fantastic collection of shoes created at this company, which I learned was one of the largest shoe companies in the world when it was running in the late 1800s to early 1900s. And so we're excited to have these different artifacts speak to those industries in the Central region. And again, we'll also be going to the present day. So one of the things that, you know, Lynchburg Museum System staff have shared is how like nuclear, the nuclear industry is really big for that region now. And so we're looking at how, you know, some of these industries have changed over time. So excited to have these few artifacts that I've gotten to learn about. And then thought I would just end with just like a couple of favorite stories for Central. This gallery will have themes of self-expression and then also how kinship and community relate to foodways. And so some of my favorite stories that I've helped research will focus on Helen McGee Umanya, who is a renowned modern dancer in the 20th century. She worked at the Helen Graham Music Company, dance company, and then Edna Lewis, who is a renowned chef, originally from Freetown in Orange County, Virginia. And she wrote multiple cookbooks, including Taste of Country Cooking, which also was like a memoir for her, where she shared memories of growing up in Freetown and how so much of her life was tied to farming and seasonal foods and how much that influenced her as a chef. So I've always enjoyed studying women's stories, and so these are two of my favorite ones that will be featured in the exhibition when it opens in the spring.
So, Catherine, how many objects would you say are going to be in our Commonwealth?
So it's upwards, it's between 250 and 300. So I think it's around 280 total objects. So that can be works on paper, to cookbooks, to other artifacts. So it's a very, big object list. So we'll have information and stories tied to all of them.
Yeah, exactly. That's 250 stories, just associated with the objects. And, I think that there's the potential that you could come in and, it may be a little overwhelming, the amount of content that's in this exhibit and all of the places you can explore and themes that you can explore. So before we take everyone's questions, what kind of advice would you give to people as to the best way that they can experience our Commonwealth?
Yeah, so I think as you brought up, there are just going to be so many stories and so many artifacts to learn about throughout the 5 galleries, and also the introductory gallery as well. So I would just recommend that everyone come and take their time, really going through and reading the stories, and just looking forward, hopefully, to planning programming that's connected to the exhibition as well, where people can learn even kind of more detailed information about some of the artifacts and topics and people and communities that will be featured.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the great things about having done this exhibition, is that there are so many people who are, who are featured in the exhibit, who are still with us and doing work. And so there's just wonderful opportunities to be able to meet the people featured in this exhibit and hear more about their stories, and even expand on, all of these themes. So, we thought we'd leave a few minutes for people to ask any questions that they may have. So happy to, Catherine and I are happy to answer any questions that have come up.
Yes, thank you so much, Andy and Catherine. I do want to honor everyone's time. So we have time for a few questions. If you have them, you can enter them in the chat or the Q&A feature of the program. To kick us off, Catherine, you mentioned it's between 250 and 300 artifacts. Is there a percentage goal of how many artifacts we want to be shared from partner institutions, and how much we want to be part of the VMHC collection, or is that not a consideration for this exhibition?
That's a great question. No, we didn't really go in with a certain percentage in mind. I think we really went in with a sense of some topics and trying to find artifacts and stories that could really convey that information well in an interesting way. So we're working with upwards of 30 lenders total. So, that includes the partner institutions. So it'll vary kind of gallery to gallery and case by case, what will be VMHC objects versus loans. But no, we didn't yet have any kind of percentage in mind.
Well, thank you for that. Yes.
Sorry. I was just going to say, one of the first things that Catherine did once the sort of general themes had been talked about with the partners is, you can talk more about this, but you did like a really deep dive into our collection on all of those themes. I think in the end, the goal was to pick, like you said, just the best stories from wherever they came from.
Well, I think maybe I'm a little biased, but I'm very excited to see it too. I have not gone into as much detail as Andy and Catherine have, for sure, but hearing bits and pieces, it sounds like it's going to be a really cool exhibition. Well, again, I don't see any additional questions, so we can wrap up here. Andy and Catherine, again, thank you so much for taking the time to give us just a taste of what we all can enjoy come May. And for all of our members who have joined us today, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, of course, for your continued support as members of the VMHC. We couldn't do what we do without you. And we so look forward to welcoming you back to the museum. You're getting some inside scoop here. We will send out some emails and notifications coming up soon to you via email, but mark your calendars. We are going to have a member preview day before we reopen to the public on May 11th. So you as members will be able to be among the first people to see our Commonwealth, along with the rest of the new exhibitions that Andy highlighted at the beginning, and of course to see our new museum store and our new museum cafe, where of course members get a discount. We will, of course, give you much more information about how to register for the member preview day. And a quick plug, we do have lots of other member programs set between now and reopening. You can check all of those out at virginiahistory.org. And if there are any questions that come up after the program, you can always email me at edarling@virginiahistory.org, and I can pass those questions along to our curators. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you at the next program. Have a great day.